We're in the cast courts at the V&A. It's such a strange and special part of the museum. Believe it or not, a little while ago, this was actually endangered. There was a big conversation at the V&A about whether or not these were worth having. This is museum real estate, and all these things are just replicas, strange Victorian plaster ideas. And so there was a lot of advocacy for keeping them, and I think we can see why. We get to tour the world with loads of different cultures and periods, mostly but not entirely sculpture and architecture. And so we've wandered through and we found our way to a copy of Donatello's St. John the Baptist, made for Siena Cathedral in 1457. It is huge and bold and very hairy. What do you think of it?
Hairy for sure. I love this sculpture. We were walking through and he just like leapt off his pedestal to ask us to find him. And I just love the realism of it, the way you really get a sense of who this guy was, at least in the eyes of Donatello, but also I think in our own eyes as you read his story in the Bible. There's no idealizing of him here. It's like real animal skins and wildness of the way Donatello has sculpted him.
We can see the scroll that he's holding as well. And here, we haven't got an inscription on the scroll, but we know what it says. Typically in images of John the Baptist, he'll be holding a scroll saying, whether in Latin or English, "Behold the Lamb of God, Ecce Agnus Dei." And so we can see the way that Donatello has like shaped his hands, his fingers. We can see the veins, the structure of the joints. And that draws my attention to what he's doing with his other hand. There's a strange story with the original sculpture that when Donatello finished it, that hand actually didn't exist. He sort of did it without this arm. And so the arm is a later addition, and it tells a story. What do you think of it? What do you think of the drama of these hands?
Well, the hands are amazing, and the fact that the right arm, the arm that is sort of in a position of blessing or baptizing or gesturing, was the missing arm. We've discovered that's how Donatello delivered the sculpture, which is a kind of a weird way to deliver a sculpture to a patron without an arm. But we've learned that his right arm is a relic in Siena Cathedral. So maybe there was some connection to John the Baptist having lost his arm as part of his martyrdom or execution ultimately at the hands of Herod. But the expressiveness of these hands is extraordinary, and the way he's grasping that scroll as if it's like he's holding on to it for his very life is amazing.
I love the body, the way that it connects to this much, much older tradition of classical sculpture, where you have a bit of contrapposto, where he's not sort of standing stiffly and straight. He's got his knee bent, and he's got his head turned. He's got his head almost turned away from us, and together with the way that his legs and his feet are positioned on this very rocky ground, like a little bit of the desert has come with him on this little miniature plinth, or like he's this incredible giant on the move. He is dynamic. He is not just standing still for us. He is on his way. He is the one who preaches, teaches, points the way ahead, insists that he is not the Messiah, that Jesus is the Messiah. And he just leaps out of the wilderness, out of obscurity as a baby in our text, in order to arrive dressed in this animal skin, having lived off the land, so that he can proclaim something radical and new, and so that he can baptize Jesus, so that Jesus sets an example for us. I love John the Baptist because it's like he's a big hinge. He's right on the threshold between the Hebrew Bible and prophecy and what happens when Jesus arrives. So what a perfect thing for us to focus on as Christians in Advent, in between the week where we think about prophets and the following week, where we meditate on and we give thanks for Mary. What do you think of the way that John the Baptist's expression is maybe teaching us something about who he is and who Jesus is.
Well, I love that you said that he's moving, that he's on the move, because the sculpture seems to have caught him sort of mid-gesture, almost like a snapshot, as if he's moving from one thing to another, and he's caught a glimpse of the Lamb of God that he's come to announce. It's almost as if he's looking toward Jesus or toward the coming of Christ, and he's caught a glimpse of him, and he's stopped just momentarily to absorb the fact of his coming. And of course, he knows what his job is. He's been called as a prophet by God, and he's on the lookout for this coming Messiah. And it's almost as if he's just caught the first glimpse of him now, in this moment, and he's absorbing his own knowledge of what has happened, what has arrived, what has come, and what will happen.
This sculpture works so well for that Advent story because I think that in that gaze over his shoulder, looking backwards as well as looking forwards, catching that glimpse and then sharing that with us, he's asking us, do you see what I see? And there's something called the Advent prose in our Advent liturgy. And one of the lines from that is, I see the power of God coming and a cloud covering the whole earth. And then the response is, go out to meet him and say, tell us, are you the one? And that feels like such an Advent moment for me, where on the one hand, John, in his preaching, is fierce. He is really telling people that they need to change their lives, that the way that they have been experiencing God is just a fraction, just a fragment of the way in which they will and can, if they choose, experience God through Jesus. He's fierce. He's also joyful in his way, because it's his job to say, guess what? I have someone to introduce you to. And it costs him everything. As you said before, he was executed, he was beheaded. So this too is right at the beginning with his camel hair and this amazing rough cloak that Donatello has imagined, has given us. This is just at the beginning of a story that will ultimately end in a sacrifice that anticipates Christ's own death. John the Baptist is one of the most characterful and complex figures at the beginning of Jesus' adult New Testament story. And also, of course, John the Baptist is there right at the beginning before either he or Jesus is even born. We remember that experience of the anticipation of birth and Advent too. And so in this moment, even looking at this fierce grown-up adult figure striding out from the wilderness, I'm thinking about the visitation, and I'm thinking about Mary's Magnificat, which she sings in the presence of John the Baptist in Elizabeth's womb. What do you think about putting those two things of time and space, of hope and joy together?
Oh my gosh, I think that's what the Advent story is all about, really. It's about already and not yet.
Yeah.
It's about waiting for the thing that has already come. It's a paradoxical time in our liturgical calendar because we are waiting for the birth of Christ, and yet we know that Christ has already come. And the meeting of Mary and Elizabeth in the visitation is that moment where even before he's born, John the Baptist recognizes the coming Messiah. He leaps in Elizabeth's womb, and
Yes.
he recognizes who he is in the presence of even before either one of them is born. And that brings me back to his gaze here in this sculpture, because he's looking, I don't know that he's 100% certain. He's wondering, is this the one? Are you the one we've been waiting for? And he's got this sense of dawning recognition that in fact the Messiah has come.
May we all be inspired by that dawning recognition. This is what we're hoping for in the dawn of Christ's arrival. I'm so glad that in the cast chords, with all of these different things around us, we both looked at this and thought, we have got to draw this into our story of art and Advent.